Very good afternoon to all of you. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll offer you a brief overview of phakic intraocular lenses. I have no financial disclosure. So phakic IOLs have evolved over the years. We initially began with the angle supported and iris fixated lenses. However, they were associated with risks of corneal decompensation and uveal tissue inflammation. So we moved on to the posterior chamber phakic IOLs. I'll be dealing with these IOLs through my presentation. Now, what is the need for a phakic IOL? So there is, even though the prevalence of the high myopes in the population is lower, they are still 16 times more likely to present for a refractive surgery as compared to the low myopes. LASIK in such high cases is associated with an increased risk of regression, post-LASIK ectasia, and also higher order aberrations which come secondary to the excimer ablation. Hence the need for an alternative form of treatment. The phakic IOLs have shown in various studies a high predictability for these high errors with accuracy. Again, they preserve the corneal sphericity and give you a better quality of vision. The accommodation is preserved as the crystalline lens is left untouched. Now, if you look at this, when you do a laser on the cornea in the central 6 to 6.5 millimeter optic zone, you induce aberrations, significantly the spherical aberrations, which obviously become higher with a greater refraction. Now, for patients who have large mesopic pupils, this could lead to nighttime glare and halos. Since the ICL is placed closer to the nodal point of the eye, it increases the effective optic zone on the cornea by a factor of 1.25, thereby improving the visual quality. The indications have also moved on to post-LASIK ectasia and keratoconus, and various studies have demonstrated results. So what were the findings in these studies? As regards the extent of keratoconus, the ICL results were better in earlier keratoconic eyes. However, in eyes with more advanced disease, the results were not as good as ICL for high myopic astigmatism, which is secondary to the increased optical aberrations of these highly keratoconic eyes. The next question is the duration between the cross-linking process and the implantation of the ICL. A duration of 6 months is satisfactory, and there are very few reports of hyperopic shift or progression following 6 months, but these were very negligible and had no impact on the refraction. Another concern was the impact of a full thickness incision on an already weak cornea. However, they did not find any significant results. The long-term stability over 3 years is satisfactory. Now, the selection criteria would include a stable refraction for more than 1 year. The central AC depth, which is the distance from the corneal endothelium to the anterior lens capsule, should be more than 2.8 millimeters with a healthy specular count. The preoperative planning includes the white-to-white measurement, which is critical because this determines the size of the ICL that is to be implanted. Digital calipers give very good readings. These can also be validated by other optical instruments such as the Pentacam. The anterior chamber depth again can be measured by various optical devices such as the laser interferometry or the OCT. Contact devices would indent the cornea and give you an erroneously low anterior chamber depth. An important caveat, however, to remember in these keratoconic eyes is that advanced cases can cause the curvature to increase and the cornea to bulge forward, giving you an erroneously high reading. So here it is recommended to reduce not more than 0.2 millimeters from the central AC depth for the subsequent sizing. For the toric varieties, you need to mark the patient preoperatively to account for the cyclotorsion compensation. So various manual methods have been devised. However, they may be less accurate. So there are now new measurement modules which help to capture a high resolution image of the patient's eye. This is the Varian system, which takes a high resolution picture of the iris, the limbus and the scleral blood vessels, which serve as landmarks, and any change in their position intraoperatively will help to determine the extent of cyclotorsion. So this is a small video which shows the use of the Varian system in a toric ICL implantation. So it begins with the registration, following which the overlay is then projected onto the cornea. It begins with the corneal incisions. You can see the main incision temporally with two paracentesis ports about 90 degrees apart. The mouse isn't working. So following the insertion of the ICL, the next overview that you have is for the toric implantation, which helps to align precisely the implant without any parallax effect. So when they compared the results of manual marking with Varian on the first hour postoperatively, they found that the postoperative rotation was 50% lower in the Varian group as compared to the manual. So this is a video which demonstrates the loading of the ICL. Here the cartridge is filled with viscoelastic. The lens is then removed from the container. One should look for the landmarks to make sure that it is oriented correctly and vaulted anteriorly. This is then inserted into the cartridge. A coaxial forceps are then used to pull the ICL into the tunnel of the cartridge, which is subsequently loaded into the injector for subsequent implantation in the eye. So this is a toric phakic IOL. You can notice the manual marking has been done. The main corneal incision here is constructed temporally, which is about 3 to 3.2 millimeters. The phakic IOL is then gently implanted into the eye. While it's unfolding, one should make sure that the landmarks on the haptics are in the correct position to ascertain the correct positioning of the lens. Following this, the foot plates are subsequently tucked under the iris. Now it is important to make sure that the manipulations are carried at the optic-haptic junction, and one should avoid touching the optic. This is then followed by a copious viscoelastic wash. So there are various complications which can happen at any stage from preoperatively to postoperative. Now according to a Cochrane review which was published in 2014, the three major complications associated with these lenses included a re-rotation, cataract formation, and transient IOP spikes or glaucoma. So the anterior subcapsular cataract in these cases is secondary to a change in the aqueous flow, which can result in a change in the metabolism of the crystalline lens. Again, low vaults and the thickness increase of the lens with age can lead to an intermittent touch between the ICL and the crystalline lens. So this is a case of an anterior subcapsular cataract in a patient who's undergone a phakic IOL implant. It's very easy to remove these using the hand-over-hand technique. The incision can be extended to about 3.2 millimeters or a little larger. Following this, the cataract procedure is as normal. The IOL power calculation does not change and is done as a normal phakic eye. ICL repositioning is fairly straightforward even if it's done years later. The initial incision is opened out. The anterior chamber is formed with viscoelastic and the lens is re-rotated. Now there were various factors which were attributing to this, which were demonstrated affecting the stability of the ICL. A lower vault or an undersizing can lead to an increased rotation in the eye. Again, there was a study by Mori et al. In which they demonstrated that if the angle of fixation was more than 5 degrees from the horizontal axis, the rate of rotation was 5.63 times more. This is essentially because the vertical sulcus to sulcus is larger as compared to the horizontal. Again, an in the sulcus implantation will result in a more stable implantation as compared to an implantation on the ciliary body. Upside down ICL is another complication. One should inject the lens slowly in the eye, especially in the early phases, and look for the landmark holes in the haptics to ascertain the correct position. Even if most of the lens has been injected but a bit is still in the cartridge, it can still be withdrawn in case the lens is upside down and can be subsequently reinserted. Raised intraocular pressure is another complication. In the early few postoperative days, it could be because of retained viscoelastic, which can cause high spikes. So one should make sure that the viscoelastic wash done is copious. Anti-glaucoma agents or peripheral iridotomy can help. One should also rule out a steroid responder in this case. In cases where these conventional approaches are not working and the vault is excessively high, one would require an exchange for a smaller size lens. So in conclusion, this offers a non-ablative, safe approach for high refractive errors. Thank you.